Hello and welcome to the Kanawha Valley Hustlers. This is Joe Justice. I'm here with Ryan. Ryan, tell me, buddy, what's your hustle?
My hustle is learning about everything to do with economics and what's going on in the actual world.
Oh, wow. So if you're talking about economics, so let me ask you this. We're at the beginning of 2025. We've got new political administration, both in the state and nationwide. Everything's up in the air. Things are crazy. So how do you deal with uncertainty?
That's a great question. That's something that I ponder every single day. It's part of a big part of my life. And what I'd like to say is try to take it one day at a time, right? We can't predict the future. We can't predict what's going to happen 1 year from now. Everything's very up in the air with policy, what's going on, as you mentioned. Tariffs, you don't know what he's actually meaning. He could be saying one thing to use as a ploy. But I think what the big question is, or the big thing to keep in mind is, what is your goal, right? And that's what I like to think about is like, as long as my understanding or like my horizon, with my investments or what I'm trying to do is sound, then the long term will play out the way it's supposed to. I think everything short term is noise, right? Like they'll have profound impacts in the long term or in the short term, but I think having a disciplined process now is what's really important.
Yeah, you talk about noise. That seems to be one of the biggest challenges for people is differentiating that signal from noise. How do you figure out what's a signal and what's noise?
I think it comes back to the basic principles, right? I think people get caught up in what's someone doing and they get biased with emotions on, like, say, their actual personal political beliefs. But, I think fundamentally when you think about it, like the U.S., in my opinion, is the greatest economy in the world, and it has been for quite some time. And it's hard to, unless something drastically changes, there's nothing that's really going to change that, right? And I think he is making policies and he wants to put America back on the map or make America great again. But regardless of opinions, it's like the American economy is strong as like all that we're at all-time highs, and like nothing that is really signaling, right, when you actually look at the data, that's going to change.
That's right. That's great to think about. And tell me, so from what you do, I see you quite a bit at networking events like this here. We're at Business After Hours with the Charleston Area Alliance. What's some of your tips for getting around, getting to know people, and just engaging with people to get them to know, like, and trust you?
Well, I think first and foremost is getting close to you, right? You're also at every one of these events, and I think the biggest thing is to be genuine. You don't want to be fake. I can't really do that. I'm a very positive and optimistic person, but I think one of the biggest tips is first just getting started, right? I think when you first come out to these things, it's uncomfortable. You don't know people. You don't know the Joe Justices. You don't know the people that know people. And when you meet one person, it's like a tentacle effect, right? It spreads to other people. So it's like, I know Joe, then Joe introduces me to someone else. I can talk to him about a topic, and then all of a sudden someone else will pop into the conversation, And I'd say a secondary tip for me is start with a compliment and a smile, right? It's like, I like your tie, right? He commented on my tie about frogs and gave me a whole story on Greek mythology. I really enjoyed the conversation, but that started with a compliment and then a question, right? And it's like, that's what all these events are about, is just learning about each other and just being positive.
That does sound like something I would say.
Yeah. And it was a great conversation, man. We talked about dragons and how they're the apex predator and how the stars, the bear with the tail from one country or a civilization to another in different time periods. Like, you just never know what you're going to encounter with Joe or any of these events. But I can tell you one thing is, like, every time I come to these, I learn and grow from every experience I have.
Well, kind of talking on that, because we were talking a little bit about mythology and we were talking a little bit about history and anthropology and all that kind of stuff. Like, at the end of the day, really, people are people, right? It doesn't matter if you're ancient Greek civilization or Aztecs, you're still people are people, right?
Absolutely. And we were having this conversation a little bit earlier, and I think it's important for people to realize, too, that you might feel awkward or uncomfortable come to these things, but so does everyone, right? And it's like everyone has the human experience, like I like to talk about it, but it's like embracing that being uncomfortable, and then you grow as a person when you're uncomfortable. I'm a big believer in pain precedes progress, right? So it's like, if I can come out here and put myself in positions where I feel uncomfortable, I can learn from those as long as I keep coming back and never giving up, And I think events like this, doing what you do with these types of interviews, is just so great for young professionals like myself to come out here and get exposure, So I really commend what you're doing.
Great. Well, thanks, buddy. And then as we're kind of wrapping up here, one thing to keep in mind, one thing I want to ask you about is, as you're thinking through that pain precedes progress kind of a thing, talk to me a little bit about why it's so important, no matter what it is, to kind of get out of your comfort zone.
Well, I think if you're not growing as a person, you're going backwards, right? I think in this fast-paced world that we live in, it's like innovation is the future.
I talked to you a little bit about archetypal stories and stuff like that. That's actually the story of the tortoise and the hare. The hare sits back and relaxes and does nothing. And that slow and steady progress, you're actually losing. So you're not really standing still. The hare's never really standing still. He's actually falling behind.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And see, that's something I never really put two and two together with what we're talking about. You know, one of the joys of meeting people like Joe, and I appreciate the additional archetype, you know, I'll put in my back pocket. But I think it's just, for me, like, I've really embraced trying to be the best version of myself and just trying to get better every single day, you know, and understanding that I'll never be perfect and no one else will, but it's progress is the goal. And so it's like, you don't make progress unless you get out of your comfort zone, because if nothing's changing, nothing's changing, right? And so it's like, I'm comfortable a lot of times now in my life, but I'm also growing a lot because of it, and I just embrace that uncomfortableness that I'm going through every single day.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you for watching and listening. Remember, this is Joe Justice, the Kanawha Valley Hustler, reminding you to hustle hard, hustle smart, and hustle with a smile.